The lecture hall was as silent as the grave, each student keen and attentive to the lecturer's every word. On first glance at this scenario, one would think that this was the most attentive and disciplined group of students they had ever come across. The truth of the matter, however, was not a question of discipline, but rather a matter of circumstance. In an Indian university, with a good number of international students from all across the world, with lecturers speaking more Hindi than they did English, noise and inattentiveness served as a liability, especially to those that didn't conform to the silent, disciplined ambience that the lecture halls had become accustomed to. It was frustrating for the international students who knew little to nothing about the Hindi language, and the local students were polite enough to oblige the silence so as to aid their classmates in their quest to grasp what the lecturer was talking about. Natasha was one such student from a country called Zambia, who was misfortunate to find herself amidst Hindi-speaking lecturers who had little or no regard for those more inclined to English. Natasha was a sweet and fun-loving girl who was loved by most, and those that didn't love Natasha only hated her because they couldn't find anything to hate about her. This wasn't to say that she was perfect. No, it simply meant that she was kind enough to put others before herself, and sometimes it was at the cost of her own comfort. She seldom spoke her mind, and when she did, she carefully constructed her words in such a way that they would be the least confrontational. It was easy to see why many loved her, yet the highlight of her world was more internal than external. For a single strand of external moments, there was a complex maze of processes and occurrences internally, and so it was rather difficult for the casual mind to comprehend such a girl. Each year and experience had added layer upon layer of her life that one, if granted access into it, would easily get lost. So, for the most part of her life, she rarely expressed herself, not out of timidity, but rather due to a rare kind of humility. And at this time of her life, she was among this group of scholars attaining an education at the tertiary level in a Hindi-speaking culture. Although Natasha was peaceful, she seemingly couldn't stand for injustice. It did seem unjust for the international students who spoke no Hindu to have to endure the lecturer's constant use of a language the majority did not understand. The lecturer was going on and on in Hindi, which was getting frustrating for this patient angel. At that point, a side of her that she had kept hidden to most people was constantly trying to resurface. She tried her best to keep the mystery hidden and undercover. After the events of Estates Park, as she called them, she had decided to keep it buried. When the lecture ended, she approached the lecturer for the infinitieth time and made the plea of the international student dilemma again. But once more, the lecturer, much like the rest, was rude. So rude, in fact, that he started speaking flat out Hindi. At that point, a familiar sensation, reminiscent of the Estates Park events, began to course through her veins. Her eyes began to change color. She began to crunch her fist and grind her teeth. Then suddenly, she stopped and determined that she didn't want to repeat the events of Estate Parks. So she breathed in and breathed out. Then she turned to walk away, saying in her mind, "Don't say one more Hindi word. Don't say one more word in Hindi." All should have ended at that moment. Things would have been peaceful. But the lecturer, like most people, didn't know about Natasha's mysterious secret. Unfortunately for him, he would find out in the most practical of ways. For just as she was about to walk out of the door, the lecturer said something in Hindi. At that moment, something came into her mind that would be responsible for her actions. She leaped out of the ground in a 180-degree aerial twist. She then proceeded to adjust her foot in a 90-degree angle and aimed for the unsuspecting lecturer's face. His Hindi-speaking diagram was interrupted with the most bodacious kick in the history of his family. At this point, lightning coursing through Natasha's veins, she leaped once more into the air, this time with a somersault maneuver with the intent of delivering another foot into the now grounded lecturer's stomach. She grabbed him by the collar and repeatedly bashed his head into the chair, repeatedly telling him, "Teach in English, teach in English." When she was done, the lecturer lay there mixed with pain, fear, and confusion. Natasha turned to walk out, but students had been watching the whole incident and were filming it on video. Natasha's secret was out. Now everyone knew she was a ninja who was qualified to kick the living torch out of a fully grown human being. It was that day she earned the name Lecturer's Bane. The video went viral in India. Now, every Hindi-speaking lecturer knew that their Hindi lecturing days were over, for if word reached the Bane as they began to call her of their unjust conduct, Natasha would lay the smackdown on all their Hindi-speaking diagrams. From that point on, lectures in Indian university became clear. The end.